ഭൃംഗാദിപേ ഹരികഥാം ഇവ ഗായമാനേ. പാരാവതാന്യഭൃത സാരസചക്രവാക ദാത്യൂഹ്യഹംസസുഗതൈത്തിരിബർഹിനാം യാ. കോലാഹലോ വിരമതേ അചിരമാത്രം ഉച്ചൈർ ഭൃംഗാദിപേ ഹരികഥാം ഇവ ഗായമാനേ. We'll go word by word meaning. Synonyms: Paravada, pigeons; Anyabhrada, cuckoo; Sarasa, crane; Chakravaga, Datyuha, Jalinyon; Hamsa, swan; Sukha, parrot; Taitri, partridge; Barhinam, of the peacock; Ya, which; Kolahala, tumult; Viramade, stops; Achiramatram, temporarily; Uche, loudly; Bhringadipe, king of the bumblebees; Harikadam, the glories of the Lord; Iva, as; Gayamane, while singing. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation: When the king of bees hums in a high pitch, singing the glories of the Lord, there is a temporary lull in the noise of the pigeon, the cuckoo, the crane, the chakravaga, the swan, the parrot, the partridge, and the peacock. Such transcendental birds stop their own singing simply to hear the glories of the Lord. Purport: This verse reveals the absolute nature of the Vaikunta. There is no difference between the birds there and the human residents. The situation in the spiritual sky is that everything is spiritual and variegated. Spiritual variegatedness means that everything is animate. There is nothing inanimate. Even the trees, the ground, the plants, the flowers, the birds, and the beasts are all on the level of Krishna consciousness. The special feature of Vaikuntha is that there is no question of sense gratification. In the material world, even an ass enjoys his sound vibration. But in the Vaikunthas, such nice birds as the peacock, the Chakravaga, and the cuckoo prefer to hear the vibration of the glories of the Lord from the bees. The principles of devotional service, beginning with the hearing and chanting, are very prominent in the Vaikuntha world. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjanasalakaya Chakshurunmilidam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthavidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamahyam Dadadi Supadantigam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yudapadagamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajadam Sahagana Raghunathanidam Tam Sajivam Sadhvaidam Savadudam Parijana Sahidam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalidam Shri Vishakhanidamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dhinabandhu Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kanda Radha Kanda Namostude Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krishabhanul Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarupasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Padidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktum Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinamadidastu Ma Vidushavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining today. So we were going through Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 15th chapter. And this chapter is titled as the Descriptions of the Kingdom of God. So the context, we were going through that. The demigods all approached Brahmadev because of demigods saw and experienced that the bad omens, the entire universe is trembling and has become darkened. So they wanted to know what is the exact reason for it. So they approached the higher authority, the Brahma, the perfect living being, who is already been understood and he can understand the transcendental subject matter. So here, the demigods wanted to understand the reason behind all this. So in everything is happening according to the will of the Lord. So we should also see that absolute truth. Everything happens is according to the will of the Lord. So we go and imagine it. We go and speculate. We put our own thoughts. We say that this is this way, that way, this way. We don't come to the conclusion. So that's why we have to always approach, take the higher authority, so that it's always descending. So higher authority is always seen the truth. So as is mentioned that they have seen the truth. Tattvadarshinaha, this spiritual, this higher authority, the pure devotees of the Lord is known as Tattvadarshini. Tattvadarshini means they have seen the truth, principles, or absolute truth. Here in the case of Brahmadev, the demigods approached the Brahmadev and they knew that Brahmadev is the perfect living being and a devotee of the Lord can impart that the science or the transcendental truth of all this is happening. So that's where we are. Brahmadev is nicely explaining about the descriptions of the spiritual realm. So we may ask this question, why Brahmadevi started to describe the glories, the descriptions, the beautiful glorification of the spiritual abode, spiritual dham. The reason for that, Brahmadev, because of, and the demigods were an illusion. They were not understanding. So there is a nature, there's a tendency that we all come to conclusion that what we see with our eyes, what we see with your body, gross and subtle body is all that what we have. So but Brahmadev here describing, especially sage Maitreya giving this to Mahatma Vidura, and of course Srila Sukadev Goswami explaining to the Parishit Maharaj, and then the Sudha Goswami explaining this to the sages assembled in Naimisharanya. All these were the reason for this, one reason, that to see and understand the absolute truth. Only those who have seen the truth can impart this transcendental nature. So it takes us beyond our mental and material conception of life. So that's what is exactly Brahma is also trying to do, so that they can understand what is the exact cause and reason for it. So that's where we came to this verse, and this verse Brahmadev is explaining very nicely that when the king of bees hums in a high pitch, so we know that the spiritual realm, so there is a picture here. So we can see that everything in this spiritual realm is full of conscious. As it is mentioned that even the dust, even the living beings, even the residents, all are conscious. Even the windows in the plants and the trees and the creepers and the everything in the spiritual realm is full of conscious, and that's called at the spiritual stage or spiritual state. So we are completely into the gross and the subtle, and then we don't come to that spiritual stage or spiritual realm. So we will see today that how we can understand these facts. So here Brahmadev explaining to the demigods that when the king of bees hums in a high pitch singing the glories of the Lord, so there are lots of other beautiful living beings like the pigeons and the cuckoo, the crane, the peacock, the swan, the parrot, the partridge. They were all, of course, their own way of making sounds or making glorifying the Lord. But when somebody else, in this case, when the bumblebees, they started to glorify the Lord, they completely stop. They are very keen and very attentively listening the glories of the Supreme Lord. So here, the very important fact, even though they are into the Vaikuntha planet, everything is there in the full, 100%. Everything is in full. There is no contamination at all. There is full of enjoyment. That's called Ananda. The full of Ananda, full of enjoyment, even though everything is there, but they are full of conscious of the Supreme Lord. There, every moment, even the dust particle is there to serve the Supreme Lord. They are not their own. So this is the difference between the spiritual and the material. The spiritual is completely conscious of the Supreme Lord in every moment in their life. So that's what it is. So it's very important to understand that the fact of that in spiritual realm, even every living entity is full of conscious, and they are eager, and they always eager to hear and serve the Supreme Lord. They don't have any other motive. They don't have any other interest other than the Supreme Lord. So Srila Prabhupada here it's mentioned in the purport that this verse reveals the absolute nature of Vaikuntha. So this is the important fact, and this verse especially Brahma is revealing this to the demigods, the absolute nature of Vaikuntha. And also we can see that the perfection of a pure devotee, perfection of a devotee. So this we can see that all the Vaikuntha, the inhabitants of Vaikunthas are the pure devotees of the Lord. So how do they attain that pure devotion? Because of their unalloyed devotion to the Supreme. So how we can attain that perfection? So this is not that just somebody said something or somebody from their mental concoction that we brought up all these things. No. These are all revealed by the pure devotees of the Lord. They have seen the truth. They have seen the absolute nature. So here in this case of Brahmadev saw this when Krishna in that second canto, 9th chapter, when Krishna uh, when Krishna revealed all this to Brahmadev, just by the touch of Brahma, Krishna came in front of the Lord and shook hands with the Brahmadev. Brahmadev is such a penance, and Lord was very pleased with the Brahmadev, and Brahmadev could have completely understand the nature of the Vaikuntha planets, and that we can see in Brahma Samhita. The entire Brahma Samhita is the glorification of the spiritual realm. So here we can see that the Brahmadev also Brahmadev initially described this to the Narada Dev, but Brahmadev didn't reveal this to the demigods. When the demigod approached, Brahmadev started to reveal the nature of the spiritual realm to the demigods. So that's their great fortune, and that's also our great fortune that we are hearing this from the Brahmadev in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So here we can see that the imperishable world, the Vaikuntha planets, the divine, Brahmadev explaining everybody is in the four-handed Vishnu form. Everybody is imperishable. Everybody is eternal there. Everybody is full of bliss and full of joy and full of knowledge, and they are all in the service of the Supreme Lord. Here we can see that this is where we started with it. The four Kumaras, came to the doorsteps, the entrance of the Vaikuntha. There we can see that the beautiful picture of the Jaya and Vijay and the four Kumaras. And then we can see that here the picture of Brahmadev narrating, explaining the details of the Vaikuntha planets to the demigod. And here we can see that the Brahmadev explained this to the demigods that the Vaikuntha planets begin the 209 million miles away from the Satyalok. So we Bhagavata explained the beautiful descriptions of the spiritual and the material world. The spiritual world is considered as the Tripada Vibhuti, that means 3/4 of the entire creations of the Lord is the spiritual planets or the Vaikuntha planets, which is the 3/4. We can imagine that. All this cosmic creation, material cosmic creation, is just 1/4, which is known as the Ekavad Vibhuti, and which is completely, this considered as it's a cloud in the spiritual sky. The material sky is just a cloud in the spiritual sky. So here the Brahmadev says that the park there shines like final liberation itself and contain wish-fulfilling trees Chintamani Pragara Satmashu Kalpavriksha, which blossom all year around. There are fragrant winds and creepers dripping with honey near the bodies of water. Cries of exotic birds mingle with the humming of bees, and magnificent flowers bloom everywhere. Devotees of Vishnu, along with their beautiful wives, travel in aerial vehicles made of jewels, emeralds, and gold. But the beautiful, smiling residents of this realm cannot distract the minds of the opposite sex, since everyone is absorbed in Krishna. This is the point we have to remember and realize, dear devotees, that the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha Loka is completely absorbed in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Brahma continues in that way. In that personal abode of the Lord, the material modes of ignorance and passion do not prevail, nor is there any of their influence in goodness. There is no predominance of the influence of time. So what to speak of the illusory external energy? It cannot enter in the region. Without discrimination, both the demigods and the demons worship the Supreme Lord as devotee. This is exactly, dear devotees, that this is goes beyond these modes of material nature. As we all know that this material, sky, the material world is comprised of these three modes of material nature. Devi Hirsha Gunamaya Mamaya Durataya. This material nature consists of my energy, three modes of material nature, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So this is beyond. That's why it's not Paravyoma. The spiritual sky is known as Paravyoma, or we call it as Paraprakriti, and this material nature is known as Aparaprakriti. As Krishna says in the 7th chapter, Abareyam idastamanyam prakritim vidime param. Krishna says to Arjuna that there is beyond this material nature, beyond this material nature, there is a superior nature that's called Paraprakriti, or is known as the spiritual nature. There is no modes of material nature affected, and everybody is serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full of conscious of the Supreme Lord. So here further continues that Brahmadev, the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets are described as having a glowing sky bluish complexion. So inhabitants, we can see that in the picture, is beautiful. Their eyes resemble lotus flowers. Their dress is of yellowish color, and their bodily features are very attractive. They are just the age of growing youth. They all have four hands. They are all nicely decorated with pearl necklaces with ornamental medallions, and they all appear to be effulgent. Some of them are effulgent like coral and diamonds in complexion, and have garlands on their heads, blooming like lotus flowers, and some wear earrings. This is Srimad Bhagavatam explains the beautiful descriptions of the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets. And this gives us the absolute nature of the Vaikuntha planets. The Vaikuntha planets are also surrounded by various airplanes, all glowing and brilliantly situated. These airplanes belong to the great Mahatmas, or the devotees of the Lord. So you can see in this picture the airplanes. It's beautiful. It's like mansion. It's not that just a small airplane what we see in the material world, but this is like a big mansion, and it expands itself as per the thoughts, as per the desires of the devotees of the Lord. It expands itself, and we can see that the Kardama Muni had such a mansion in order to get the mother Devahuti, and they wanted to relish their married life. And we can see that this is not just what is called that whatever we say in the material world, okay, what is the reason, how it all works there. I mean, if we start to ask all these questions, we won't come to that point. But dear devotees, this is the realm, this is called spiritual realm, that's beyond this material nature. That's why it's always reiterating that this is beyond the material concept or material nature. There is a spiritual nature that we can all understand. We all have a spiritual nature, or that because of that spiritual nature, we are sitting here and hearing and listening and speaking, moving, and so many things that we relish. This is eternal. This is the eternal symptom of the life, eternal symptom of the living entity. That's always there. That's eternal. But we are conditioned, we are contaminated here in this material world, so we cannot go beyond certain limits. So that means we are conditioned. But once we attain the spiritual nature, that's a process. That's a process of bhakti here in this material world. Once we attained the spiritual nature, then that's where we attain. That's the perfection of the devotee. That's where the importance of this verse itself, that how one can attain that perfection. So here we can see that. Further, it is mentioned that the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, in her transcendental form, engaged in the loving service of the lotus feet of the Lord. and and being moved by the black bees follows of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure service to the Lord along with her constant companions, but also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. So there are wonderful descriptions like that here. The Lord Brahma gives to the the demigods, Devatas, and here Lord was seated on his throne and was surrounded by different energies like the 4, the 16, the 5, the 6 natural opulence, along with other insignificant energies of the temporary character. So, dear devotees, this is giving the absolute nature of the Vaikuntha planets or the spiritual realm. And the Supreme Lord is there in his abode, and he is a person, and he is as a wonderful, beautiful form. And this is the absolute nature of the spiritual realm, spiritual planet. So then we come to the stage of that, how we can perfect this, how we can attain that abode, how we can perfect our life. So Srila Rupa Goswami mentioned this in a Nectar of Instruction. It's the 8th verse. It's a very beautiful verse that reveals the transcendental, the secret, and how we can attain that. Srila Rupa Goswami mentioned like this: Tannama Rupa Charidadi Suprudanu Sugurdanu Smrtyo Kramena Rasayana Manasi Niyoja Tishtan Vrajetad Anuragi Janugami Kalam Nayed Agilam Idi Upadesha Saram. The meaning of this verse is, Sri Rupa Goswami mentioned, the essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Raja, the Golok Vrindavan Dham, and serve Krishna under the guidance of a devotee. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to his devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami gives us that how we can perfect our existence and how we can attain the supreme. And as we know that all the examples from the Gaudiya Vaishnava, and there's so many acharyas, so many devotees. Just for an example, Srinivas Acharya was completely immersed in the service of the Lord and completely meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One day Srinivas Acharya started to meditate, and this meditation continued for 3 days. And Srinivas Acharya was completely meditated upon the Supreme Lord, and the devotees around couldn't understand what is happening, whether Srinivas Acharya has the life or not. He passed away, or they were wondering, and they were trying to find out that what is happening. So they put some little small leaf in the nostril, and they found out that yes, there is still the breath, but Srinivas Acharya was not even coming out from his trance. So here Srinivas Acharya then later they described that Srinivas Acharya, by the trance, by the meditation of the Supreme and the Supreme abode, Srinivas Acharya entered into the pastimes of Srimati Radharani. And Srimati Radharani and the friends and the Sakhis, they were taking bath and water pastimes, and the nose rings of the Srimati Radharani fell inside the water. And they were all searching. And Srinivas Acharya also entered into that search and trying to find out the nose ring of Srimati Radharani in the water. And searching and searching and searching and searching, this actually continued for 3 days. And finally, when the Srinivas Acharya found out that and got this nose ring from the water, Srinivas Acharya, excited and jumped out and opened his eyes and loudly shouted and said, I found it, I found it. So everybody then realized what you were talking, and everybody was asking, inquiring what you were talking, what you was talking. Srinivas Acharya has explained all these descriptions. Dear devotees, this is the stage of spiritual realm, that this is the stage we all can, by our utilizing our gross and settled body in the service of the Supreme, that we come to that stage. And this is the stage beyond this material consciousness, and we come to that spiritual consciousness which is beyond this material realm. And here Sri Rupa Goswami further explains that Krishnam smaranam janma chasya preshtam nija samhidam tattat kada radaschasu kuryad vasam vraje sada. A devotee should always resides in the transcendental realm of Raja and always engage in Krishna smarana, jana chasya preshtam. the remembrance of Sri Krishna and his beloved associates. By following in the footsteps of such associates and by entering under their eternal guidance, one can acquire an intense desire to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then further, Sri Rupa Goswami very nicely explains that what we need to do. In the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. This is called Sravana Dasha, the stage of hearing. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of his transcendental form, qualities, and pastimes, one can attain the stage of acceptance called Varana Dasha. When one attains the stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of Smarana Avastha, the stage of remembering. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance, and trance are the 5 items of progressive Krishna Smarana. Dear devotees, here the trance or samadhi which mention is the perfection of our existence, perfection of the devotees, because of they enter into that samadhi, they enter into the trance by chanting and hearing, recollection and remembrance and anusmriti and all. By this process, one can enter into that realm, that spiritual realm. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals, but later remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. So this is the process, dear devotees, that we have to follow. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentrated and is called meditation. When meditation expands and becomes constant, it is called anusmriti. Anus means always follows, is constant, it's steady, spontaneous. By uninterrupted and unceasing anusmriti, one enters the stage of samadhi or spiritual trance. After smarana dasha or samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original constitutional position. At that time, he can perfectly and clearly understand his eternal relationship with Krishna. That is called Sampati Dasha, the perfection of life. So, dear devotees, this Srila Rupa Goswami gives such a beautiful way that how one can attain that sampati, the perfection of life, and this is what it is. So, once we attain that perfection of life, then we transport to the spiritual realm and eternally. So, this is the stage we have to always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And this process of Srila Govinda Das says that Sravana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Dasyare Bhujana Sakhijana Atma Nivedana Govinda Dasa Vilashare, Sramana Kirtana Smarana Vandana. So this is the essence of this. And Govinda Das is, in a poetic form mentions, engage in the hearing and chanting, and Srila Prabhupada mentioned the purport. And this hearing and the chanting is also predominated in spiritual realm. So everybody is in full conscious of Krishna, and that's what is we are practicing here only by this bhakti yoga, loving devotional service, which mentioned our acharyas. The essence is same, that all we have to do is that engage into the loving devotional service, starting from hearing and chanting, and then we come to the Vishnu Smarana, and this is the process. And by this process, we can attain the perfection. So thank you so much, dear devotees, for joining today. Let me stop here, and 7 o'clock. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Grandhara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Bol, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to wish everybody a safe and Krishna conscious day ahead. Offer our prayers to the Supreme Lord by chanting 3 times. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Hare.
Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
Hare Hare.
Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare.
Shri
Narasimha, Jai Narasimha, Jai Jai
Jai
Narasimha.
Narasimha,
Praladesha,
Praladesha,
Jai
Jai
Padma, Mukha Padma
Padma,
Bhava.
Ugraveera
Akshnam Jalam Jalam Sarvadokam. Narasimham Vishanam Bhadram Murtyu Murtyu Namamyam.
Narasimha Bhagwan
Bhagwan
ki
ki
jai, Prahlad Maharaj ki
Jai.
jai. Let's offer our humble obeisances to all the humble Vaishnavas.
peace of the Lord. Vanchakalpatarubhishya Krapa Sindhubhya cha Padidana Bhavanebhyo Vaishnaveebhyo
नमो नमः। वैष्णविंद की जय।
जय
श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय।
जय
श्रीला प्रभुपाद की
जय
गौर प्रेमानंदे।
Namaste.
हरि 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 बोल हरे कृष्णा थैंक यू एवरीबॉडी हरि बोल हरे कृष्णा
Thank you, Simheswar. Thank you, everybody.